Hi everybody, just want to welcome you to today's webinar, 6 Common Workplace Wellness Mistakes and How to Avoid Them, with our lovely host Katrina Walton from Wellness Designs. Today Katrina is going to share how investing in employee wellness will give your organization a critical and leading edge for business success through a 6-step framework for creating a best practice and sustainable health and wellness strategy. Throughout the webinar, Katrina will provide opportunities to ask and answer any questions you may have, and also we'll be running a couple of polls throughout the webinar as well. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Katrina. Thank you everyone for joining again. The webinar should last about just under an hour. So thanks and over to you, Katrina.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alan, for the warm introduction, and wonderful to be partnering with the Safe Step on this Friday afternoon. So if you're like most employers these days, I'm sure you're struggling with how to really ensure your employees are fit for work, both physically and psychologically, how to really create a safe workplace, and how to ultimately boost morale and engagement and position your organisation as a great place to work. Now, some of you might have tried already a few workplace wellness initiatives to solve some of these challenges as well. Maybe you've tried the like of lunchtime yoga classes or standing desks, corporate massages, flu vax, stress buster seminars and the like. But often what this can do is put a band-aid over the real problem with hardly any measurable improvement. Now, it's definitely possible to get results from workplace wellness and achieve your business goals. And in fact, research shows that financial performance can increase more than 2.5 times when health and wellness is encouraged within organisations. But the problem that we find is that most companies are approaching wellness in the wrong way. So we work with dozens of organisations across a diverse range of industries, including the likes of health and aged care, retail, transport, telecommunications, mining, government agencies. And it's wonderful in this webinar today to see such a wonderful diversity of industries joining us, and role types as well. But no matter what industry they've been in, we've tended to find there's 6 common mistakes that happen when it comes to workplace wellness in the 25 years that we've worked in the field. So we're looking forward to sharing some of those with you today. But before we do, I'd love to get a bit of a sense from yourselves and some of the experience in our virtual room in the chat box, whether some of you have either made, or mistakes that you might have made in your workplace around addressing the health and wellness of your people, or maybe some other mistakes you've seen other workplaces make. So just in the chat box there, if you can just take a minute to jot down any mistakes you might have observed. We'll just look at those as they come through. No one's making mistakes. So here we go. Lack of cohesion from Samantha. Lack of measurable results from Alex. Natasha, not understanding what it is that employees want. Yes, making assumptions, often going straight into that implementation mode. Great, Natasha. Fantastic. From John, not prepared for responses and panic. Yes, with resourcing, often you see that knee-jerk reaction, don't you? We see that commonly. Tapering off engagement from Sam, and that can be a challenge for longer stand programs, can't it, about keeping it fresh and relevant. Fantastic. From Kelly, lack of measurable results. Great for employee engagement, but can it be measured? Not well resourced, and we'll talk more about that later. Not looking at the full picture from Andrew. And Megan's made a great point there about no linkage with the organisational strategy or culture. So how does it support the broader organisational goals? And from Erin, there are other issues within the business. Yes, often it's not seen as a priority. There's other competing priorities. And also managers knowing how to speak, yes, about having that acumen. Fantastic. That's a great snapshot. Thank you. Great. So we'll be delving into some of those. So you're certainly in the right place for today's session. We're going to delve into the 6 common mistakes, drawing on our 25 years working in the field across a range of industries, and certainly a large percentage of that time has been spent managing large-scale programs in-house, so for up to 22,000 employees. So certainly we have a very good grasp of some of the challenges inherent on not only developing such programs, but most importantly really sustaining them, and how to demonstrate that value back to the business. So let's jump in. So firstly, we're going to go to the first of our polls, or sorry, actually before we do that, just a bit of a definition of a healthy workplace to set the scene for today's discussion. And this is drawn from the World Health Organization. So I'm just going to give you just a minute to read that definition before we reflect further. So you might have picked up on a few things there with that definition. Firstly, when we're talking about effective and integrated management of employee health, safety and wellness in the workplace, it's more than just physical well-being, but we're also looking at the broader psychological, social and organisational conditions, particularly given that we spend a third of our life at work. The workplace has been recognised as a really important setting for preventative health by the likes of the World Health Organization, by government agencies. And the other thing that you might have picked up on there is also that sense of control over and empowerment. But at the end of the day, it's a shared responsibility. We all have a vested interest in having healthy employees at work. So as far as the scene for today's discussion, so essentially we look at three core elements to an effective and integrated health, safety and wellness management-based approach. Obviously, the area of safety and the core and legislative requirements that sit around that, and managing poor health and illness when an employee does get ill or injured, how as workplaces we can support them back in a timely fashion. But where I'd like to concentrate today's effort is really looking more upstream to the proactive and often more cost-effective management of health, safety and wellness within the workplace. So that brings us to the first of our polls. So I'm just going to bring that up firstly now. Our first poll number 1 about what is the current status of your organisation's wellness strategy. So we're just going to do poll number 1 to begin. So if you can tell us where you are on your wellness journey there. So if you can just choose one. So whether you have a very comprehensive and formal strategy that's underway or whether you're a bit earlier on in your journey. So we'll just wait for those responses to come through. So you should be seeing a poll there pop up on the screen. Yep, here we go. Great. So it'd be fair to say about 75% in fact appear not to have a current formal strategy, but do so have some formal initiatives in place, 76%. So the lion's share, 12% have a strategy that's partially or not yet implemented, and the rest have no initiatives in place at the moment. So certainly it sounds like different maturity levels joining us today. And there was a study that was done by Bupa a few years ago now, and they looked at, of the 150 workplaces that they surveyed, within Australia, that 70% of those did have a formal strategy, and that 16.8% of those were looking to develop one into the future. So we'll talk a bit more in a moment about some of the key drivers for that. So that brings us on to the first of our mistakes. Let's jump in. So mistake number 1. They fail to convince the C-suite. So obviously a successful wellness strategy or anything within the business starts with that strong leadership support. And often this comes down to the question, what's keeping your CEO or your leadership team up at night? And what is the real burning platform for investment? So is the company trying to control costs? Are they trying to grow market share? Are they navigating a restructure? Are they trying to attract and retain talent? And how can a structured and comprehensive workplace wellness strategy potentially support the organisation in achieving those goals? The other thing that we also often talk about in our training, our accredited training that we run, is also about making it personal. You know, getting to know your senior leaders, what's their leadership style, what are their strengths, their weaknesses, and also what are their passions outside of work. Because as the saying goes, you know, people do business with people. And I think often we assume that it's a real rational basis for leaders getting behind such strategies, but often there can be a real emotional undertone as well. And firstly, then we need to convince them why are the 3 reasons, you know, for investing in our greatest asset, our people. And the first thing is it's the right thing to do. As I mentioned before, we spend a third of our life at work, so the workplace plays a really important setting for preventative health. And we also know that chronic disease, accounts for 70% of healthcare expenditure within Australia and 50% of GP presentations. But despite this, I'm sure you'll be staggered to know that of our healthcare dollar within Australia, only currently 1.34% is targeted towards prevention, as opposed to 5% with our neighbours in New Zealand and in 9% in Canada. So within Australia, it's very much still a sickness-orientated system, and we're very much waiting downstream for the often very expensive management of health, safety and wellness within the business. Secondly, it's the legal thing to do. So obviously employees have a duty of care to provide a safe and healthy environment, and that includes doing everything reasonably and practically possible to minimise both physical risk and also psychological risk within the workplace. And organisations that fail to do so obviously open themselves up to potential litigation, but also reputational risk as well. And thirdly and finally, it's the smart thing to do. So we know that healthy employees are also safe, engaged and more productive employees. And there was a study done by Medibank Private a number of years ago that looked at unhealthy employees that they defined as having 5 or more health risk factors for chronic disease. So the likes of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, not exercising at the necessary level for a preventative effect, compared to healthy employees who had 2 or less risk factors. And what they found is that employees who were unhealthy had 9 times more sick leave, and also healthy employees were 3 times more productive than unhealthy employees. So as that's hopefully demonstrated, certainly a vested interest for businesses. And this was some research that was published by PricewaterhouseCoopers a couple of years ago now. And what they found is certainly ignoring mental health, the burden for Australian businesses is in the vicinity of 10.9 billion a year. But encouragingly, for every dollar invested in mental health initiatives, there was an average return of more than $2. And what was also interesting for those SMEs that might be in the audience today was the real compound effect and flow on for mental health for smaller businesses, and they actually calculate a return on investment as high as $15 for every dollar return. So certainly a strong basis there. And if we use that iceberg analogy, and this is again a slide that we use within our training, where we're looking at some of the, visible direct costs of poor health and wellness and the flow-ons to the business, which are often very evident above that waterline that you can quantify. So the likes of workers' compensation costs, injury rates, how many staff are utilising your EAP, etc. But what we often fail to do is really acknowledge what are some of the indirect and flow-on impacts of poor health and wellness to the business, and really being able to quantify what some of that ripple effect is as part of your business case to your senior leaders. So that can include the likes of presenteeism. For those that might not be familiar with that term, that's where people are turning up to work, but due to a health or medical reason, they might not be performing at their optimum. And there was a study again by Medibank Private a few years ago that found that that was 4 times the cost of sickness-related absenteeism for workplaces. Turnover as well, again, it's been suggested as much as 1.8 times an employee's wage to recruit, onboard and train a new staff member. So the cost of churn, for the business, particularly with the likes of early medical retirement as an example. Also temporary staffing, particularly for the likes of the health and aged care sector, education sector, where you're having to bring in agency staff, to backfill, which again can be much more costly. And also can have a flow on to employee and customer satisfaction, and that can particularly be for the likes of SMEs where you might have frontline staff, and again that has a flow on to customer satisfaction and care. So I guess the main point is not to forget, where possible, to try and quantify some of those hidden costs for your business. And this is, if you haven't started already, I highly recommend you pick up this publication from the CSIRO, which looks at the 6 megatrends that are shaping the workplace environment. So it's no longer a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 here within Australia. We see a real changing nature of work. We're seeing a myriad of working arrangements, including the things like rising screen time and increasingly sedentary workforce. So the nature of hazards too within the workplace and associated risks is changing. An ageing workforce, again, which can have a whole series of implications from a knowledge retention and capture point of view, from a transition to retirement point of view, from a workability point of view, so people's both physical and mental capacity to perform the role required, particularly in repetitive-based natures of work. And it's about not just looking at the challenges of an ageing workforce, but also the opportunities, and really celebrating longevity in that people are living longer and they're working longer, whether it be for necessity or for desire. So that has, again, a lot of flow-ons to the business. And also there's the rising issue of workplace stress and mental health issues, the rise of AI. So again, with the limits of time, we won't have a chance to delve into a lot of these in further detail, but I'd encourage you to pick up this document and also stop by our Wellness Designs website, where we have a series of free recordings that are available on the likes of things like the ageing workforce, delving further into that topic. So I guess in summary, what is the value proposition? So as we said, a number of parties have a vested interest in having healthy employees at work, obviously for the employee themselves through having access to convenient subsidised initiatives within their workplace, for the also it's an extension of that, their families, and for the employer it certainly does have bottom line impacts. And obviously for a healthy economy, it's also very important into the future. And what are employees themselves looking for? And we're certainly, and there's a lot of discussion and literature to support this, that the nature of what employees are looking for in a great place to work is changing. And this is a study that was done by Willis Towers Watson a couple of years ago now. And what they found is, probably unsurprisingly, employees are looking for an employer who understands their needs, who provides benefits that offer choice and flexibility. So we're certainly seeing a disruption of work in that regard as far as how and where people work, and also an organisation that supports their physical, social, financial and emotional well-being. And there's a lot of research and literature to also support that generational shift, where probably older generations, where they may have worked to or lived to work, and now some of the younger generations coming through are certainly working to live. And that's changing in that employee value proposition then for employers. And the conclusion of this study was that for employers who get it right, there is a significant payoff on that other side. And this is a quote that was drawn from, again, a PricewaterhouseCoopers report. And the conclusion there was that we really have to move from illness to wellness. It's no longer a nice to have, it's a business imperative, and that businesses will have to invest in wellness. There is no choice. I love this last line. It's not philanthropy, it's enlightened self-interest. And we're certainly seeing that change in the conversations we're having with our students, with prospective clients, where particularly we're probably in the last 18 months to 2 years, where we're really seeing that shift from it being a nice to have to being, we should be doing it, to, we really need to be doing it, but we don't know where to start. Or we've done wellness before, but we want to do it right this time. They're being much more considered around where they're spending. So I'd be really interested to see if you're observing the same in the maturity of conversations within your workplaces. Again, if you just want to pop it in the chat there, whether you're seeing that shift as well. And I think in a funny way, it's probably led to the maturity and evolution, because people are being much more considered, and we're seeing a shift towards more results orientated and sustainable strategies. Okay, so we'll just see if any comments come through. If not, we'll keep moving. So Sam has said here, I think the prevalence of illness and the impact of this on business is giving organisations no choice. Yes, agree, Sam. Adam, our organisation has great intentions but no strategy. Okay, so some increased maturity required there. From Kelly, most workplaces in the last 8 years have concepts of moving towards this. Yes, I would agree, Kelly. We're certainly seeing that shift. It's gone from that sort of more activity-based focus to more results-orientated, doing a few things, doing them well. Andrew, shifting in principle but low focus. Interesting. Yeah, we're fortunate enough to have an expert panel that help guide our training programs, and we have a virtual roundtable twice a year, and that was one of the observations that yes, there's been a shift in thinking, but it's not always translating into a greater spend. So that's interesting, your comment. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we'll keep moving. So mistake number 2, they've now I have to just move my box so I can see. They totally missed the mark. Mistake number 2. So they're not taking the time to really undertake a comprehensive needs assessment to ensure that where they're spending their precious time, money, and efforts is going to get the best bang for their buck. They're moving straight into that implementation mode without really understanding what are the needs, what are the interests of our people, what are the risks, what's the cost of doing nothing if we keep going along this path, and also what are the expected outcomes and expectations of our key stakeholders. So certainly in our training, we work off a 5-step model. Firstly, step 1, looking at that consultation with key stakeholders as to what they feel are the needs and priorities, and also importantly, what their expectations are for that future strategy. So typically that will be with a series of focus groups or HR leaders, safety leaders, etc. Step 2 being that data collection, so that can involve that desktop analysis of key, HR safety indicators, looking at what policies are already in place, what strategies are already being rolled out, are they effective, and the like. I can also include consultation with the likes of focus groups, key stakeholder interviews, or for a lot of organisations, it can be a good opportunity to survey their staff as to what not only their needs are, but what they're actually interested in. And that can often be the art and science of trying to marry those two together. But then when you've got all that wonderful rich data, it's really then being able to answer that so what question. So what does all that mean for our business when we look at all this information together, and where are there potentially some hotspots bubbling up where there might be also more targeted areas that need potentially different interventions, who have different needs. Often falling out of a needs assessment as well, you might end up with a series of 20, 30 recommendations, and you're not going to be able to tackle it all at once. So it's coming back to, we use a bit of a prioritization matrix with our clients as to, what's feasible, how does it align, with the organizational strategy, are there other things already happening in the business that we can leverage on, have we got the expertise and capacity to actually address this issue. I think it comes back to that saying, quality, not quantity. Certainly doing a few things, doing them really well, and that can often, whether it be a pilot or otherwise, serve to then further leverage and present that additional budgetary ask if needed. And step 5, such an obvious but we find really overlooked step in our experience, is communicating those findings and recommendations back to your key stakeholders. I'm sure you've had this happen yourself, where you've taken time to complete a survey and then just never heard anything back as to what was done with that information or what changed on the back of it. Okay, so moving now on to mistake number 3. Often we see companies adopting that scattergun or a tick the box approach, or as we like to call it, that spray and pray approach. So it could be the likes of, standing desks or flu shots, lunchtime boot camps, gym memberships. They're all nice to have at work, but how do they really support and align to, your organisational strategy? So you really need a targeted strategy, again, stemming from that needs assessment. And certainly in the time we've been involved in the industry, we have seen a real shift where, 20, 15 years ago, and even a lot too, we see this still happening commonly, where companies are very individual centric. The onus is very much on the individual to improve their health and wellness. And with that, you typically see a lot of interventions like your health checks, like your stress buster seminars. But what they fail to do is acknowledge the broader factors that impact on employee wellbeing on a day-to-day basis, including the culture. What are the norms? What are the values? What's the climate of our workplace? And is it supportive or not of employee health and wellness? Is there an underlying bullying culture, or is there a long hours working culture? Is there an endless meetings culture? And for any fans of the movie The Castle will know, at the end of the day, it's all about the vibe, and that can differ from site to site and even department to department. At an environmental level, are we making those healthy choices the easy choices for our people, whether it be through healthy workplace design, end-of-trip facilities, ensuring there are healthy options, in our vending machines and the like. And at a policy level, are we embedding health and wellness into the DNA of the organisation so it does become that business as usual? And we know that healthy policy can be a catalyst for behaviour change. You only have to look at the adoption of smoke-free policies, and the research suggests that smokers are twice as likely to quit on the back of an implementation of a smoke-free policy. And even those that do continue smoking, their cigarette consumption is typically reduced. So certainly Australian research tells us that where we take that integrated approach to employee health, safety and wellness is that we're much more likely to impact on health behaviours, we're much more likely to improve chronic disease for our populations, and importantly, we're much more likely to increase overall participation and engagement in our wellness strategy. So moving then on to mistake number 4. And often they don't build the capability in-house to drive the strategy. So having a comprehensive and tailored wellness strategy is great, but it only solves half the problem. And many organisations fail to consider the importance of building the capability of their people to then drive that strategy internally within the business. So from your leaders, through to your frontline employees. So what I'd like to do now is just to touch briefly on what we call the 3 E's. So firstly, you need to enable the leaders in your organisation. So we've spoken before about the importance of garnering that leadership support, both initially and ongoing. But also importantly, leaders themselves need to be well to lead well. So to be effective, resilient and high-performing leaders, health and wellness is a real cornerstone of that. Barack Obama was quoted when in office that if I didn't exercise, I would literally break. And he realised to perform at that level, looking after his fitness in that instance was really critical. And apparently used to train, at 4:30 each morning in the gym for that very reason. Also, we know that a leadership style and behaviour impacts not only on job satisfaction, safety, adoption of healthy behaviours, and also participation in wellness efforts as well. So that in itself is really important. And they play a real role as change agents. And this is some research drawn from Rongan and Associates and also Steve Aldana and team. And what they found is probably unsurprisingly is that where there was strong support or it was expected by their colleagues or supervisor to participate, that employees were 2.87 times more likely to get involved in wellness efforts. And also what they found is there was a strong correlation between leadership support in well-established programs and also 4.2 times more likely to report an improvement in employee health risks and also 2.5 times more likely to report significant reduction in medical costs. So probably no surprises there, but certainly that is also showing through in the research and certainly in our experience on the ground as well. So moving now on to our next E, empower. This is about empowering your key personnel to lead the strategy within the business. So everyone certainly knows that, and what we're seeing increasingly is that Australian New Zealand organisations are recognising the importance of having dedicated personnel to do this. So what I'd like to do now is go to the second of our polls, and we're really keen to know that whether you have a lead person in your business who is responsible for wellness in your organisation. So we're just going to relaunch the poll, so if you just bear with us a minute. Okay, let's move on to okay, so you should be seeing now the question, do you have a lead person? And those results are just coming through now. So the first response being yes, dedicated role. Oh, it's showing the same poll as before, is it? Let me just try relaunching that again. Oh no, that seems to be coming through now. So let us know if that's still showing the same question. Otherwise it appears question 2 is now showing. Okay, that's encouraging to see. So far we've got 45% that do have a dedicated role. Oh, okay, got all 3 questions in the first. Thanks, Adam. Thank you for that. That might have been the way it was set up. Thank you. So we're doing on question 2, poll number 2 there. Okay, that's encouraging to see. So we have 31% of those that are joining us today that do have a dedicated role, and 44% who do, but it's not a formal part of the role as well. 18% not looking to at this stage. So that's probably a little high. Bupa did a study a couple of years ago now to send the polling there. They did where they found that 58% did have dedicated personnel, and they were expecting that to, change into the future and increase. So, and certainly, as I mentioned, we're seeing that in the clients in which we work, and just reflected in the volume of students that are coming through our practitioner training as well, which is fantastic from a whole series of backgrounds. And you might have spotted this last year, again, just reflecting that trend. In Smart Company, they announced their top 10 best jobs for desirability and growth. And actually, wellness managers were in the top 10 last year, and they concluded driven by corporates looking to bring wellbeing for workers into focus. So finally, after 25 years working in the field, we're on trend, which is fantastic. Okay, so now poll number 3, so we'll launch it again. So be interested to know, too, of those that do have people responsible, what qualifications they have as well. So I'll just relaunch that poll again. So question 3, for those that do have people in place, what the qualifications of those people are. So whether they do have formal training. Okay, so quite a few seem to have public health, which is terrific. Okay, about 25% as it stands with no formal training. So, and again, we do see that often with workplaces where, with all best intention, often people are running programs, off the side of the desk, often without the necessary training or qualifications to enable them to do that role and do it well. So certainly a gap we're trying to fill with some of our accredited training programs. Okay, so moving on to our next E, about energising employees. So research and experience shows that the most successful workplace wellness strategies are those that have a dedicated team of wellness champions on the ground. And there was a survey by Buck Consultant that they do a global wellness survey every 2 years of trends within the field, with surveying workplaces across the globe. And what they found is that 48% of those workplaces surveyed were using local champions, and 78% believed there was a correlation between the activity of those champions and also subsequent engagement with their wellness strategy. So those site or department-based wellness champions can play a really critical role in providing that peer support, that encouragement, that motivation. But more importantly, for the person leading the strategy, they're the eyes and ears of your strategy, literally providing you that important communication as to what's working or not working on the ground, but also as a communication conduit for your strategy as well. Just on that, I just want to show you a little case study of one of our clients, University Sydney, and just how they've really leveraged the Champions Network within the university. We've been back recently, we've been back several times, and it's been wonderful to see the ripple effect that the Champions Network is really having across the business and driving that culture. So I'll just play that video now.
The University of Sydney is one of, I think it's Australia's oldest university and certainly one of its largest. We always knew a Champions Network was absolutely critical in a large and complicated place like the university. The trouble is we didn't exactly know how to go about setting one up. But what we know is with the Champions Network, we're actually able to reach in through the middle of our organisation and really drive our strategy deeply into parts of the organisation where it really matters to staff. We chose Wellness Designs after a recommendation from one of our other wellness partners. When we met Katrina, we were actually really impressed with her ability to listen to us and talk with us and understand our needs and design around our needs rather than approach us in a very standard way.
Much deeper understanding of well-being, the bigger picture of well-being. They also gained skills and capabilities from the program that they could then take away and use in their workplaces immediately. So they felt empowered.
Training was really essential to get the right people into the network, and what we wanted to do through providing some really good training was make it a valuable process for the champions themselves. We want staff to come to work and have opportunities to engage in activities that enhance their sense of well-being, either physically or psychologically, through their working day.
Champions being able to give us feedback more directly to their areas means that we can design programs that suit them. We know what's working, what isn't working, and changing the culture to one where people are accepted, valued and cared for is really important.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that little case study, and I think they've had some great success with their Champions Network, and as Julia pointed out, I think really choosing the right people too is a really important part of that. And if you are interested in looking at a Champions Network, we do have a free 7-step guide that's available on our website that provides you a little step-by-step process on how to do that. But particularly in a traditionally complex and very siloed nature of settings, such as a university, you can see some of the impacts that that's now having for them. Okay, so moving on to mistake number 5. So often we see organisations failing to measure the impact and value of investment back to their key stakeholders. And there was a study, as I mentioned, that was done by Bupa a couple of years ago now of 150 workplaces that were investing in workplace wellness. And what was quite telling about that study is only 12% were measuring, the impact and value back to the business. So is it any wonder then that come budget time, when the red pen, gets waved around, that if you can't, again, demonstrate that value and how it aligns to the organisation's direction and key drivers, certainly can be jeopardised. And really articulating, as I said, how it links back to the key drivers for the business. So is it about being a great place to work? Is it about getting a handle on workplace injuries? And also what we talk a lot about in our training, and there's a great saying that alludes to this, is telling the numbers to the CFO and telling the stories to the CEO, and not forgetting the value and the powerful nature that storytelling can have in really demonstrating that value back to the business. So moving on to now mistake number 6, we find is often companies are looking for a quick fix. And certainly your health, safety, productivity issues have often developed over time, and they're a result of a complex mix of your company's culture, policy, environment, and also individual-centric challenges as well. And something this complex certainly can't be solved overnight, and it's about getting real, meaningful results really requires an investment in the long term. And research, and certainly our experience, suggests a 3 to 5 year investment to really garner the full benefits of a targeted strategy. In saying that, not to say that you're not going to see some immediate benefits from rolling out a strategy, and certainly with our clients within a few months they can see benefits in the likes of employee engagement, team cohesiveness. At around that 1 to 2 year mark, we'll see more of those impact-based results, whether it be in the likes of health behaviour change, people quitting smoking, for example, customer satisfaction, also company image and reputation as well. And within 3 to 5 years, that's where traditionally we would start to see that needle moving on what we would term some of those harder measures, so more the likes of workers' compensation costs, injury rates, etc. And certainly we're not suggesting solely due to purely the wellness strategy, but very much back to that early discussion around an integrated approach to health, safety and wellness, and looking more upstream to the proactive and again more cost-effective management of these issues. This is a graph from the wonderful Dr. Judd Allen. We were very fortunate to have Judd present a webinar for us from beautiful Vermont, which is available on our website for those that are interested on how to really build a wellness culture within your business. And particularly when you're starting off on your wellness journey, you're going to, as he has here in his circle, probably about 5 to 10% that he terms your wellness champions that from the beginning are highly engaged in what you're doing. and involved in your strategy. Then you have your 30 to 40% that are typically supporters, that depending on what's on offer, and again, if you've done your needs assessment well, aligned to people's different needs and interests, that should translate. And then you've got what he calls your neutral, which are more your fence sitters. And that's where the likes of incentives can and have been shown to be effective, not so much in changing health outcomes, but in encouraging people to participate. Then you have your 15 to 20%, which he terms your quiet opposition. You don't tend to hear much from that group. And then you'll have your 1 to 2% who are more your active opposition. So they can be sometimes more vocal around, why is my health your business? And it's about, as he states in his quote there, about not getting preoccupied with the naysayers, letting that health culture soften the group, in saying that, dispelling any myths or misconceptions that they may have. But the whole idea is that over time you will see that ripple effect happening within your business. And the advantage for SMEs is, in our experience, that can happen a lot faster, particularly if there is that strong leadership support and also that grassroots, from the champions networks and the like. And I guess the beauty of that integrated approach that we also spoke about earlier is whether people formally participate in your wellness strategy or not, they can still be engaged with the organisation around wellness, and they're still going to benefit on a daily basis from having a healthier work environment, whether it be a correct ergonomic setup or having natural light and ventilation, or having access to free and healthy food options within their workplace, or flexible working arrangements that allow them to juggle their work and life. So if you haven't already, I really encourage you to check out Judd's work and also tune into his recent webinar. We had fantastic feedback around. So moving then, just to bring that all together, so how do we create a targeted, results-orientated and sustainable wellness strategy? So just drawing on those mistakes, this is the blueprint model that we use within our training and also within our clients, which is aligned to the World Health Organization approach. And you'll see that it aligns to essentially the 6 mistakes that we've drawn to today. So firstly, around module 1 or step 1, exploring. So what are the key drivers? What's the business imperative for investment for our workplace? Step 2, around assessing to determine what are those needs and priorities to ensure that where we spend our time and money is going to get the best bang for the buck. Step 3, design. Again, ensuring, one-size-fits-all strategy is not going to work. There's been different groups that are identified out of your needs assessment that may need further tailoring and different options as well for delivery. Step 4, engage. As the saying goes, nothing happens until people participate. So it's how do we engage our leaders, our champions, also our practitioners to lead the strategy within the business. Monitoring then, so as we've said, you can't manage what you can't measure. So how do we demonstrate that value back to the business? And step 6 is that sustainability. So to one of those earlier comments in the chat, it's about how ongoing continuous improvement, but also for more longer standing programs, how do we keep it fresh and meaningful and relevant for our people? So with that, I think we've done okay for time. I'm just going to open it up now to any questions that you might have aligned to those 6 steps. And while we're waiting for those to come through, we did have an earlier question from Luke, who was asking, how do I look at developing and building a wellness plan to cater for a diversified group of staff, whether it be geography, technology access, skill sets, education? So a great question, Luke, and a big question. So I'll just endeavour to respond to that while we wait for any others that might come through. So I think, as hopefully we've demonstrated today, it's about doing that needs assessment and doing it well to determine not only the needs but also the interests for your people, and also what are their preferred modes of delivery and how are they wanting to receive and access any initiatives. Also the benefits and importance of multimodal delivery for your strategy as well, providing that range of whether it be push mechanisms or pull mechanisms for people to have access and equitable access to the same support. Typically, we find a combination of high and low tech works best. You can't just offer an app and expect people to participate. So, for example, this might consist of a combination of the likes of video streaming, webinars, portals, social networking, apps, I think was mentioned in the question, notice boards, and also we spoke about the role that champions can play as well in really engaging people at that local or site-based level. So we did a large rollout of our champions training to a health and aged care provider recently. So whilst there was the overall framework or structure from corporate and from the organisation, that was certainly very much encouraged to make it local and really take ownership and accountability of that. And they each developed their own local action plan, to then deliver on their local needs.
Hi, Katrina. I've got a couple of questions if you'd like me to
Great.
help you with that.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, Samantha has asked, our organisation has survey fatigue, yet I acknowledge the importance of assessing needs and interests. Have you any ideas around that?
That is a really great question, and one we're encountering more and more. And certainly what I would suggest there is firstly look into things that you're already doing where you could potentially capture that information. So it could be the likes of an engagement survey that you might have coming up. There's a lot of great integrated tools that are on the market, coming into the market, which have a dedicated set of wellbeing questions. So I think that's a good way to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. And often, particularly if they're going to be using that tool ongoing, it's a good yardstick for you. So that's certainly one we highly recommend. The other way potentially is to do a representative sample, where I know in large organisations we've worked, like 20,000 employees. We didn't actually have the budget at that time to do it right across the business. So we just did essentially every fourth or fifth employee. We incentivised it, so that can certainly help as well. And sometimes too, starting initially, there is some good industry-based health and wellness data out there. The healthyworkers.gov.au website, it's the legacy website of the previous National Partnership Agreement on Preventative Health, but it does, if you're not aware already, has some good industry related health data. So sometimes it can be inferential data as well. And then ideally you can start over time as budget and appetite allows, start gathering your own data. So they're just a couple of potential ways, but no, certainly here, and we're experiencing that more and more with clients where there's that real hesitation. And depending on the size of your organisation, it can be as simple as, going around with a bit of a clipboard or doing a pulse survey, some more pulse-based measures.
And another question for you, Katrina, from Adam.
Yes, Adam.
Yeah, he says, we don't have wellness professionals as individuals forming together with good intentions. How do we start? Noting that we don't have resourcing or role remit to allocate, a business case in my thoughts, with a question mark. That's from Adam.
Yeah. Adam, can I ask what size business you are? Let's wait for that to come through.
I'll go down. There's a couple of questions underneath. I'll just pop back up to that as well. I'll
Right.
keep that for Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Mark asks also, let's see if that's Adam. Adam says 250 professionals nationally, office locations in each capital city.
Yeah, great. So Adam, that's a great question. If there isn't the initial appetite or maturity to look at a dedicated role, it could be an initial informal committee of passionate wellness advocates. We've certainly seen that work where it's more of a grassroots or ground up approach. And also there are some cost-effective ways, and we'll talk to some ways we could potentially support you in that, to get some of that professional development to give them some direction. Also through the healthyworkers.gov.au website I mentioned earlier, there's a host of free resources and tools, including survey templates, action plan templates, how to evaluate, etc. That again, a group could initially use just as a starting point. But our strong recommendation would be, again, comes back to that quality, not quantity. Doing a few things and doing them well, maybe as a small initial working group, maybe even a little pilot just to get a few runs on the board, and then to sort of grow from there.
Fantastic. And Mark also has asked the question, I noticed the 5 mistakes are not aligned with your 6-step framework. Is that correct?
The 6 steps align to the 6-step, yes, framework. So we've got the 6 mistakes. So they are aligned of sorts,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Kelly asks, are there any courses certifying wellness training?
Yeah, great question, Kenny. I might just scroll forward if that's okay. So we actually run some through our dedicated Wellness Wise Academy. We run, if you are looking for any further support, resources and supports, a nice segue, thanks Kenny. We have some free tools there for you available via our website. There's the 7-step guide that I mentioned. And also that's exactly where our academy evolved from. We really felt there was a gap and need for organisations to build their internal capability, at the different levels of the business to drive the wellness agenda. So we have wellness leaders training, which is a workshop talking a bit about the what and why it's important for their business, why as leaders they need to be well to lead well, and also the role they play in driving the agenda. But certainly our flagship course, and you might have seen some of this activity on social media, we run a nationally accredited training program for workplace health and wellness practitioners. It's an initial 2-day course, but followed by a support package, including mentoring, also access to a dedicated hub or knowledge centre with all the tools and resources to actually do it back in the workplace. So they've been curated by our expert faculty who are sort of thought leaders across a range of wellness areas. And we also have a community as part of that. So that is linked to a national statement of attainment. So we partner with our RTO colleagues there to deliver that training. And we do see we run that training across Australia and New Zealand. And we do really see a real, and this is the wonderful thing about this training, is a real diversity of people coming along. So if I think of the course we did in Brisbane this week, we had the likes of logistics, health and aged care, insurance, transport, government. We had consultants, telecommunications, so IT, so a real mix of industries. Types of people that tend to come along are those that have been told, they've got to do wellness. They might be in a HR or safety or return to work type role, injury management advisors and the like. It's totally starting from scratch through to people that are running global programs. So certainly if that you are looking to build capability, please, stop by our Academy website and you'll be able to download a brochure there, but also, more importantly, hear from others from a range of industries and what they've gained. And then we have our champions training. So that's more the local or site-based training where they might have a capable coordination mechanism, but some of our clients there have been the likes of Optus, Bupa, University of Sydney, where they're looking to boost that capacity at a local level to really drive it.
And I have one last question for you, Katrina, as well, and that's from Erin. And Erin,
yes, Erin.
My organisation is a small global company who does not run program or does not running the program globally affect the impact locally.
Sorry, can I just get you to read that question?
I will, yeah. So my organisation is a small global company. So
yes.
The question then is, does not running the program globally affect the impact on a local level, so locally?
So is the question looking at more a global approach to a local?
Yeah.
I would suggest both. So I think it's good to have alignment at a global level. And that's, again, the wonderful thing about our practitioner network. We have a lot of practitioners who are out there, running global programs. So we've had the likes of Mars Foods through us as an example, because there can be some considerations at a cultural level where the approach may need to be different. But I think to that earlier comment about the champions, it's about taking local ownership of it and accountability around it as well. So I would think a blended approach. And certainly for SMEs, if you are interested, we do have, again, some webinars and resources on our website, because we do appreciate it is a different setting and cost-effective delivery is often key. Myself being married to another small business owner as well. So I'd encourage you to check that out, which has a few more tips and resources for SMEs.
I think that's all the questions we have, Katrina, for the moment. and we're coming up to 1:25. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover off? Or?
Great. No, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today and outlining the 6 common mistakes, and hopefully that'll avoid a bit of pain and frustration into the future for you. If, like I said, you were interested in any further support and resources, I do encourage you to stop by our website. We've got lots of free webinars on a whole host of topics there that might be of interest to you. And just, we do have some upcoming dates for the practitioner training if that is of interest in Auckland, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. And also just to make mention of the Wellness Wise webinars. They are free webinars also that are available. So we've got our next topics on buy-in and influence with senior leaders, and also around building capability too. And then we've also, as I mentioned, got a new improved hub coming soon, of which we'll be doing a public launch. So it'll be Australia's first or Australasia's first knowledge centre for workplace wellness. So what we're trying to do there is really build a hub that aims of like-minded wellness advocates as a real go-to for knowledge, training, and also a community. So hope we can continue the conversation there into the future. And feel free too, if we can support your work in any way, you can book a free chat, no obligation, via our website. Just if we can help direct you into the right place, that we're very passionate about seeing workplaces do this and do it well.
And Erin just wanted to say that this has been really valuable and wanted to say thank you. And just leading on from that, we would also like to say thank you very much, Katrina, for a really fantastic webinar, some really great insights and much food for thought. So thank you also to all of our attendees for showing up today. We really appreciate your attendance. What we'll do is we'll reach out to you in the coming week or two with some additional resources and Katrina's details. So should you wish to continue the conversation around wellness, we'll make that possible for you as well. So thanks very much, Katrina. It was really fantastic and a great way to spend a Friday lunchtime, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you again so much for the opportunity. Have a lovely weekend.
Okay, and if we miss any questions, we'll answer them as well. So we'll also send out a link so you can share the webinar to anyone that didn't manage to make it. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye everyone. Bye, thank you.